Hey guys, Kyle, the Death Knight of Anime here, bringing you my review for My Hero Academia chapter 252. So, this chapter is very interesting because, in many respects, it took all my expectations with in terms of how from Endeavor's and basically Natsuo's and Natsuo's relationship would change, how it would change after this whole thing, and it simultaneously managed to both exceed them and crush them at the same time. And in both cases, I mean that as a good thing. Because okay, so like for instance, let's start off with Natsuo, who basically even after being saved, pretty much repeats outright that he'll never at any point forgive Endeavor. That he'll never at any point forgive Endeavor, no matter how many times he apologizes or even tries to save him. And I know in many respects, which is harsh, and I know in many respects it is to many people it is gonna make Natsuo come across as basically ungrateful. But at the same time, you have to look at it from his point of view. His at this point, Endeavor in some way or another, Endeavor in some form or another up to this point was looking for forgiveness was looking for some form of forgiveness, but at the was looking for some form of forgiveness or just to be a part of Natsuo's life, but again, what Natsuo says and what he talks about, it kind of feeds into what I was saying before about how Natsuo has grown past the point of needing a father, and Endeavor himself has reconciled that the things he's done will never be forgiven and shouldn't be forgiven. So at this point, he's doing. So when the chapter ends up leading to the point where he said he's distancing himself from his family permanently, he's doing the only thing he can, which is again separating from them completely, and letting whatever the future has in store for him play out. If it gets to a point where Natsuo and his family are willing to accept him back into the fold as their as I don't know as whether or not it's just as their father or just as a general member of the family, then he'll take the invitation with open arms. But if not, he's willing to accept that as but if that's the he's willing to accept that as the hand he's dealt to himself. He's taking he's but in either situation, he's accepting that his children are the ones who will dictate his future. Well, the only thing he can do is to continue to become the person he wants to be in the now. It really is an interesting situation where he just wants to. It really is an interesting situation where at the end of the day, he can't. Again, it feeds into the fact that he basically can't fix the past. All he can do is try and make the future better in any way possible. And if part of that just means separating himself from he sort of separating himself from them, then he's willing to accept that as a fact right now. And but I really like how this was handled. It was done very, very emotionally well. And in some again, and I think this is the most realistic outcome that pretty much could have come from this. That Horikoshi could have done with this, and especially with not how obviously like Endeavor is gonna like with basically Shoto, for instance, he's gonna continue to train under Endeavor as a sort of means to an end. But it's like, yeah, his children are the ones who dictate what he becomes, and his children and what Endeavor wants to be, or what's going to dictate what becomes of him in the future, I suppose. The other thing to note with this chapter is that Horikoshi is still keeping the exact details of what happened to Toya very vague. And the thing is, unless we get a revealed backstory of what, unless we get a revealed backstory of what happened to Toya within the next 2 or 3 weeks, I'm going to assume what pretty much Horikoshi is doing with this. That Horikoshi is basically keeping the details of what happened to Toya very vague, and he's doing on purpose, only for the purpose of gradually building on the mystique of the event itself in a way that he can build up to a point where he can officially reveal that pretty much Dabi is Toya. And I want to make it clear, the whole pretty much Toya Dabi thing, it's one of those things where I don't doubt that pretty much Toya is Dabi, but what I am kind of curious about, and what I am kind of wondering with this whole thing of Toya being Dabi, is everything in between and the lead up to when we get the official reveal that they're one and the same person. I guess you could say that the one thing I'm kind of wondering with this whole thing of obviously Dabi and pretty much Toya thing is, I'm wondering how Horikoshi is going to build up to and build on the connection narratively from here, because just pretty much saying that pretty much Toya just pretty much saying that pretty much Toya is Dabi is one thing, but pretty much how Horikoshi builds on this and how he pretty much connects the dots, that's pretty much going to be the key for me, and how he makes and how he just kind of makes it all pretty much, and how he makes it all pretty much makes sense, I suppose, within the narrative of the story and the details you've been given. Because going back to that shrine, it does kind of very much seem like that basically Toya is dead from what we know. So obviously pretty much Toya survived in some way, but we just pretty much don't know the details in itself, and the details of how it all, and the details are going to be what's important from here. Now, last week's review, you guys may remember what I said about Ending and how he was kind of de-evolving into a plot device villain. Well, it kind of sort of came full circle here. Now, I will say this much: his pretty much dialogue, his dialogue in this chapter does warrant a little bit of sympathy in the sense where when it comes to Ending and what he was screaming out in this chapter, you can tell that Ending was so broken to the point where he had this idealized version of Endeavor that would never change. So for Ending to see Endeavor as this different person is hard for him to comprehend. Does that mean I take back what I said about him turning into a plot device villain? Not entirely, but it does. Not entirely, because in many respects it played out exactly like that in this chapter. And one thing I'm kind of hoping happens from here is that Endeavor has a moment of visiting Ending in prison to reconcile with him, much like All Might did for All for One. But yeah, but at the same time, this chapter it did make me recognize a lot more of the tragedy with. It's one of those things where he's kind of bordering on the line a little bit between being like a plot device villain, and he did gain a little bit of sympathy a little bit of sympathy back for me with this. Like, I didn't. Like, I think it's one of those things where I just wasn't like paying attention a whole lot to pretty much his to pretty much to pretty much endings, a lot of endings dialogue last week or something like that, I think. Now, but yeah, one thing but like I said, the one thing I still do want to hear, I would just do, but yeah, the one thing I still do want to see is Endeavor like visiting Ending in prison or something like that, just to reconcile with him. Now, one thing we do learn from this, though, is that Ending is the second villain to target Endeavor. The first, I imagine, being High End. So that does kind of build on the possibility that Ending was basically set loose on purpose by the League as another means to kill Endeavor. I mean, with Redestro's resources, with basically Redestro's resources, it wouldn't be too far fetched, really. Like the League of Villains have a lot more resources now, so because of that, it wouldn't be too insane to think that they would have the power in order to release villains from prison now, which in itself is a scary thought. And in many ways, I am so mad at Horikoshi right now because he keeps dangling Bakugo's hero name right in front of us, but just out of reach enough to where he won't tell us what it is. And but that in itself does kind of show the tragedy of that. Does kind of show the tragedy because Bakugo said outright he basically wants to tell his hero name to someone before he says it to anyone else. And in that sense, he's probably talking about Best Jeanist. And the tragedy of this is that he won't be able to tell the name. He won't be able to tell his hero name to the person he wants to. And when Horikoshi finally does give us the big does reveal like Bakugo's hero name, you can tell it is going to be a big moment for Bakugo, and when it's going to be at a point, and when Bakugo does learn what happened to Best Jeanist, I can only imagine it's going to be in a hell of an emotional ride. Like it's in the moment of like. It's like I think we're going to see a lot of when he learns what happened to Best Jeanist, Bakugo is going to go on a bit of a rampage, that's for sure. And yeah, I think when that happens, it's going to be definitely one of the darkest, probably the darkest we're probably going to see Bakugo go, I think. And yeah, but yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and listen to Crunchyroll. Death Knight Anime, signing off. Later, guys.